Dr. Cruikshank, we heard about the offshore, the Block Island project off from Rhode Island. Do those projects receive any federal subsidies?
There are tax credits that are available to offshore wind developers, much like they are to many other industries.
Are those tax credits significant?
I believe they are significant in putting the financial package together to build the wind farms.
Without the tax incentives, would those projects be able to be built in a competitive marketplace?
I believe some would, some others might not. It really depends on which region of the country you'd be operating in.
The three gentlemen in the middle, do you care to comment on that at all? Would they be built without tax credits?
It's going to be project specific, depending on the financing and the company and the location. There's going to be a lot of variables that go into that, but it would depend on the project.
Because I know where I sit in Wisconsin, those projects would not get built for wind and solar, the intermittent sources of power, without the rich subsidies that are given to developers in order to be able to build those projects. Mr. Dix, does your organization have a plan to have China and India cut down on their emissions?
Well, as you probably know, the United Nations process is quite complicated because it's entirely voluntary. And the United States plays a large role in how those negotiations play out. But I've heard, various, testimonies today about that we're competing, with China. And one way that I think that would be better for the world and for the environment would be if we were competing to help other countries transition to renewable energy. I think that would increase the energy security that people are here today saying that they want, and I think that it would address our climate crisis at the same time. And so there's a number of things I think that we could do to help speed the transition in other countries so that everyone can enjoy energy security and energy independence.
So we should be trying to convince India and China to use windmills and solar panels.
Well, I think that the, international diplomacy when it comes to climate change means that we do have to do a lot of convincing, for other countries in the world for a great number of things.
But China keeps fending us off. They say, yeah, we'll sign on to those accords, but it doesn't apply to them to some date in the future, whereas we accept those burdens now, and we've actually been the best country in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, if you believe that's actually a problem. That's actually quite a success story, yet they keep telling us that, no, give us till 2030 and then we'll comply.
Yeah, and we've also heard a lot today about the amount of oil and gas that the United States is producing, and we're a net exporter, and we're also continuing to approve large projects like the Mountain Valley Pipeline. So as a net exporter of oil and gas, I think there's a lot that we could do, and I think one of the best things that we can do is lead by example.
So lead by example by shutting down using carbon sources of energy?
I think developing clean energy is going to be good for people and the planet, and I think it's going to be good for creating jobs, because in the Gulf of Mexico, we've certainly seen automation and other market forces actually decrease the number of jobs in the offshore oil and gas sector for quite a long time now, even as production of barrels has gone up.
Does Taproot Earth have subsidiaries in China, India, anywhere around the world other than the United States?
We don't have subsidiary offices, but we work globally. So a lot of what we do is work with people across what we call the African diaspora, which is countries in Africa and places where African descended peoples live, to talk about climate justice. And so we really are thinking about this from a global perspective, not really in terms of having one country participate in energy dominance, but more like energy cooperation.
You're not in China or India?
Currently, no.
The number of climate-related deaths in the last 100 years, what direction has that gone?
I think climate-related deaths, I would have to know more about how that's categorized.
It's really an interesting chart that highlights, and I can show it to you afterwards. They've actually went down 98%. as a result of the advancements in technology, it's no different than life expectancy. What was it, like 52 years old in the year 1900? 1 in 10 babies died here in America in infancy, and life expectancy is so much higher now. Infant mortality is so much better. Climate-related deaths are significantly less, 98% less over the last 100 years. Wouldn't you call that a success story?
Well, I was just in Louisiana 2 weeks ago for some other meetings, and I participated in a coastal tour and a tour of Cancer Alley, areas that I've seen many times. And I find it very difficult to talk to people who are losing their land and being forced to evacuate and watching their friends and neighbors die of cancer and telling them that they should be grateful for how good it is. I think we can do a lot better. I think we have solutions. I think we have a lot of expertise in this country, and I think we could do a lot more to make sure that the poor people in this country have a much better life.
Wouldn't you say poor people are far better off than they were 100 years ago?
I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can measure better off or worse off. I just really think that we could do a lot better than we are, and it really pains me to see people suffer.
You talked about renewables earlier. Does your organization support any mining projects, new mining projects in America?
What we support, and I would love to share with you a platform produced by the America the Beautiful for All Coalition. I'm actually here to participate in meetings with them. This is a group of people that are focused on public lands and Justice 40, and we call for mining.
Does Taproot Earth support any new mining projects in the United States of America?
Well, I would say that we are an organization that is focused on looking at the costs and benefits of energy sources, providing that information to frontline communities, and making sure that frontline communities are at the decision-making table so that we can plan our energy system and our environmental impacts together and share the benefits.
What would you say to a frontline community like the Iron Range of Minnesota, which is a neighboring district to mine? What would you say to those folks that would like to expand mine and build new mines up on the Iron Range, and yet you see these out-of-staters oftentimes, or interlopers from hundreds of miles away who would not be impacted, and they fight tooth and nail to stop those projects, and oftentimes are successful in stopping them when local people, by and large, would like to have them built?
Yeah, so
you call that local control?
So I would never advocate for an energy project in a place that I don't live and that I'm not from and that I haven't talked to the community that's in there. And our organization is dedicated to redistributing the power to make those decisions. And so I would welcome a dialogue with this committee, with the communities up in Minnesota and the communities all across the country about how we can reform our mining laws and how we can reform governance of our energy system to make it much more inclusive.
You should take a look at the mining laws that, when I was in the state legislature, I rewrote our mining laws and modernized them, made them the toughest mining laws in the United States of America, but also allowed it to happen, whereas previously we simply had a moratorium, which I think is ridiculous. When you have something that's legal to be done, there shouldn't be a moratorium. There should at least be a regulatory process. I see Taproot Earth on their website talks about you practice anti-capitalism. What's anti-capitalism?
Well, I think that you can ask people about what the definition of capitalism is and get a million sort of different responses. But I think what we're talking about is a shorthand for, again, sort of the system that I described in Louisiana, where a few large private companies are allowed to extract resources that are natural, that weren't created by anyone, sell those for a profit, and then pass on the pollution to, again, back to our public waters and public air, so that these externalities aren't factored into their prices. The money tends to flow.
Haven't we reduced emissions significantly here in the United States of America? So I don't live on the Gulf Coast, but I just think about the electrical generation plants that we have in Wisconsin from the early 1990s, so that'd be 30 years later. We've reduced like sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, various emissions like that by as much as 90%. Isn't that a success story?
I think that you're right. I think what you're getting at is that we can, in fact, reduce pollution and not necessarily experience a decrease in quality of life. And I just think that we need to go further. I think that when we have cleaner energy, cleaner air, cleaner water, everyone can benefit. And it's
Are you
just-
talking zero emissions? When you say go further, are you saying you expect zero emissions?
I definitely-
Because there's no human being or human enterprise that's been created that's zero emissions.
Well, I think when we're talking about net zero, we're sort of talking about the net aggregate emissions for the entire globe, you know. And so what we're trying to do is get our energy system in balance where we're not emitting.
Have you studied the entire life cycle chain for wind and solar? Because we're seeing wind turbines now being buried in coal mines out in Wyoming. Is that the best way for us? I mean, are you doing the full measurement of the life cycle?
I think there are some really good life cycle assessments out there, and I do think that renewable energy compares quite favorably to fossil fuel energy from what I've read, but I think that we're in complete agreement that there are costs and benefits to every energy source, and what we're trying to do is evaluate those and then make sure that the costs and benefits are being shared much more equally so that frontline communities in places like the Gulf Coast aren't receiving most of the pollution and very few of the benefits. I think you're absolutely right that we need to have a dialogue about and eventually a policy shift to make sure that costs and benefits of the energy system are being shared much more equally. And I think that absolutely includes renewable energy as well as fossil fuels. I just think renewable energy compares favorably to fossil fuels when you look at the entire life cycle and all of the impacts.
So I went far over my time, and to the three gentlemen in the middle, sorry that I was not able to address more questions to you. We appreciate the work that you do. Production of energy is one of the most important things that we can do. I do have to say, though, I have a bill that would eliminate the subsidies for wind and solar, intermittent sources of power, if they're put on productive farmland. I do believe there's one thing more important than producing energy, and that's growing food. And I think taking our food producing areas, like in Wisconsin, where we're now sidelining thousands of acres, turning it into this wind and solar farms, by the way, industrial facilities, they're not farms, where we're eliminating farms at this point. I think it's very short-sighted in terms of the public policy front here in the United States of America.